I want to thank all of you. I want to make sure I start on time. I want to make sure I don't put my back tape. First and foremost, I want to thank all of you for taking time on your Saturday morning to be with us to talk about issues. A couple housekeeping things to open it up with. You know, a couple of these I've done before. As I walk in, folks want to talk about a congressional race that's coming up. I cannot talk about this congressional race. This is a state-sponsored event. So there'll be time in the future to talk about anything on federal issues or talk about Congress, but that's not why we're doing this today. The reason why we're doing this is I've done this ever since I first got elected to the state assembly. I think it's very important for your elected officials to give kind of update on what's going on in Sacramento, so you can get an update, not just what you read in the paper, but a little bit more in depth, and then also to answer any questions you might have, because I'm sure a lot of you brought forward questions. Number two is on a few of these that we've done before. Some people try to, get a video out and so on and so forth. The owners of the facility don't want us to videotape, and also it's respectful to other people who show up. Some of the people that show up don't want to be videotaped either. So those are the two housekeeping items. But and some of you might be a little shy and not want to ask questions. So that's why we make sure we put out the questionnaire. So, for example, if there's a question that you might want to ask but not ask in front of the whole group, you can fill that out. Our staff
this is, it is a public event.
Well, it's a private restaurant. And again, I think the best legislators are the ones not that give the best speeches, but the ones that are out in the community and actually interacting with the community.
I understand where you're coming from. I'm just trying to,
because I think it's important for you to be able to voice your concerns. I'm trying to understand. And hopefully I can take those voices back with me.
Well, okay, because that's what happened last
and that's why I'm out here.
And when I went and talked to the manager afterwards, he said that you came up to him. You never approached the manager.
The Moorpark Chamber,
okay.
we work very
That's
closely
inconsistent with what he told me afterwards.
Moorpark Chamber and community organization. And my staff said that
and I would think that,
kind of a quick update, so I'll give
look, I get why you don't, because if it goes off message or says
this has nothing to do with it. We have a low daytime population.
So if somebody were to come in here and say,
a strategy to help fill up on vacancies, industrial, office, retail. At some point in time, sales tax is going to be important because we lost our redevelopment fund.
Maybe he tells you something different.
So getting more sales, also a shop in Moorpark campaign to help encourage people who live in Moorpark to shop in Moorpark. Mayor Parkman credited us for the last quarter for increasing sales tax by 3%, so we're excited about that. Little steps, but economic development and creating an environment here to get more daytime population to support the existing businesses here, especially put more money into this conference. More about the city conditions that are directly involved with the state of California and the taking away of the redevelopment agencies.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ken. Any questions for Ken? Question?
Are we getting the movie studio for sure?
Well, the city process has been approved. Then now they're dealing with the other agencies that deal with the floodplain over there and other things with the taking some of the property that's outside the city, involving it with the development. My understanding that's going very, very well, and there's a good possibility by 2013 they may be breaking ground.
That's exciting. I mean, I think that's really exciting for the jobs that it'll bring to the community and the kind of talent that it'll bring to the community. I think it'll be fantastic. So just a quick update, and I want to leave most of my time for questions and answers. But right now, we have a budget deficit again. It's almost like that movie by Bill Murray called Groundhog Day, where you live the same day over and over again. However, the budget deficit's nowhere near what it used to be. And I think one of the biggest challenges we face in Sacramento and in California, two. One is, what are we going to do to create jobs? That's why I'd like to work hand in hand with the Chamber of Commerce. I think it's very important to understand the reason why we're in this budget situation is we have the second highest unemployment rate in the nation. When you look at our unemployment rate, only Nevada has a higher unemployment rate, and you kind of understand why Nevada has a high unemployment rate, because they don't have a diverse economy. When folks are down in the down economy, people are not traveling as much to Las Vegas, and they don't have a lot of excess income. So you kind of understand why Nevada has a unemployment rate the way they do. But we have a very diverse economy and beautiful environment. There's no reason for us to have a higher unemployment, for example, than Michigan. You see what is going on in Michigan. We have a higher unemployment rate than Michigan. We have the second highest unemployment rate in the nation. We have a diverse economy. We have agriculture, high-tech, biotech, entertainment, and there's no excuse for it. And I think the number 1, 2, and 3 priority for every legislator should be, what are we going to do to create jobs and put people back to work? And then also address those concerns of the underemployment. Because people talk about the unemployment, but they don't talk about the underemployment. People who used to make a lot more money, they're taking any job that they possibly can that they're overqualified for, because that's kind of the environment out there. And especially for young kids, there's a lot of young kids that are graduating from, they're getting graduate degrees, and they still can't find jobs from our top institutions. So I think we need to come together and do whatever we can to create the atmosphere so we can create those jobs. And that's why I wanted to make sure that Moorpark Chamber got to say something, and whatever I can do from the state perspective, also a local perspective, to help facilitate and create those jobs. That's what I want to do. Number 2, when we talk about our budget, our debt indebtedness. Our pension system has to be addressed. A lot of people don't want to address the pension system, but we have to address this pension problem.
That's exactly.
And I'm proud to say that we've been out front on a lot of these pension issues for quite some time. And Governor Jerry Brown has agreed to take on his 12-point plan. We're waiting to see some of the language, but when he put out most of the language, and we have actually authored a lot of the bills that he put out in terms of language, because quite frankly, people are living longer, and so we're raising the retirement age on some of these folks. There's no way we can sustain a system where some of the people in the public sector retire at age 50, and life expectancy is 82, and there's no way that you can sustain that system of lifetime benefits. And then also one of the bills that I created, that I was shocked it didn't pass, and Jerry Brown's kind of adopted within his plan, was, if everybody remembers the Bell incident, the city manager, Robert Rizzo, even if convicted, Robert Rizzo, after he's convicted, he will be able to collect that pension. And if he lives a life expectancy, I think the LA Times was going to get $12 or $14 million. I thought that was absolutely unbelievable, that someone doing the public works that was entrusted by the public to do a job. And so my bill simply said, if you commit a felony while on the job for the people, you forego your pension. You get the money back you put in, but you don't get the match from the people, your community, people in California. So I thought that was a no-brainer. It didn't pass the legislature, but I'm thankful. I went down and talked to the governor about it, and the governor adopted part of his 12 or 14-point plan. So I think hopefully we can address this issue, because it's an issue moving forward. If we don't address this issue, our bond indebtedness will just keep growing, and it'll be very tough when we talk about our budgetary items to move forward. And so with that, and then I was also very proud that we were able to deny the CSU president confirmation. I don't know if you read about it, but at a time when we're cutting our budgets in Sacramento and making tough decisions. For example, mine, I was one of 3 state senators that didn't take a car. I was one of a few state senators that didn't take, that actually reduced their pay voluntarily before the Citizens Commission did so. And I think all of us need to be part of the solution and show that we're all part of the solution in terms of fixing the budget. At the time when we were dealing with these issues, the CSU board
Sorry, I don't mean to be a pain at all.
Increase for the CSU president. If you look at this base salary, the base salary was double what the governor makes. In fact, it's equivalent of what the COO of Facebook makes, over $300,000 in terms of base. And that didn't even take into account the housing, the car, and all the other things that are added to that. And we thought they were tone deaf to people. And at the same time, they raised rates for kids going to college. And so, I always get frustrated at these unaccountable boards. But the one time we had accountability to this board is when they had to come back to the state senate for reconfirmation to stand that board. And we were, I helped lead the charge to make sure we didn't reconfirm, because I think they were out of touch with the everyday average citizens. And so those are never easy decisions to make, but you know, it's what we have to do if we're going to send a message that, hey, you know, this is the people's money, and we need to treat the people's money as if it was our own. And that was a course of action, and hopefully other boards and the other agencies see that message that says when you're not being responsive to the people of California, that at least us in our power, when you go to confirmation from the Senate, we're going to stand up and make sure that we remind people that they made an unpopular decision. So with that, happy to answer any questions you might have. Go ahead.
Well, I want to thank you for all the work you do facing this democratic wall that you fight for, the things you've done in the economic sphere. I really want to thank you for that. And you know, I think that this issue of businesses in California is such a no-brainer. I mean, water runs downhill. As soon as it's cheaper to do business in California, people will come to California. And so all the efforts that you make to make doing business here cheaper, as far as the regulatory burden and tax burden and employment benefits and pension benefits and unemployment insurance, when it's cheaper, people will come. You don't need to do much else. That's why they're leaving. It's cheaper elsewhere. But if I could just take a little detour away from economics, there's a bill that passed that is quite distressing, and it's probably nothing that most people know about. It was 499, which allowed children, girls as young as 12 years old, to have the authority to allow school officials and other health officials to immunize them with Gardasil without their parents' knowledge or permission. And setting aside the issue of whether immunizations or that particular immunization is good or bad, let's set that aside. The issue is allowing a 12-year-old basically the right of maturity to make medical decisions for themselves without parents' input or knowledge or permission, to me is the height of scandalous. And that's what this bill did. And so it means that your 14-year-old or 13, you could go to school one day and you could be violently opposed to this immunization, and they would come home having bought that immunization. So, you know, I just think that these kind of inroads in breaking apart the family and giving young children decisions that are really should be in the hands of their parents, it's just appalling. So, having said that, is there any possibility of these kind of this direction that this is going in to be reversed, or at least put back in the parents' hands, the rights of their children?
Elections do matter, and who you send up there. I fought hard against that bill, and actually my wife Audra took a lead when she was in the state assembly against that bill. We do believe, just like you, that the parents, we're talking about kids, have the right to know what's going on with their children's health, and too many times you know, those kind of things happen and pass through the legislature. You know, it goes up for a vote. That's democracy. And unfortunately, I think California is going the wrong way when it comes to empowering parents on what's best for their children. And so I, like you, get frustrated sometimes that we get outvoted on something that I think is very basic, that, hey, mom and dad have, the parents have the right to, that, hey, mom and dad have, the parents have the right to decide, not the government, not the school district, but the parents have a right to make decisions when it comes to their parents, when it comes to their child's health care decisions. And so all we have to do is actually get the message out, because I do think the majority of Californians would be on the side of parents having that ability, but most people don't know about that bill, and it's really up to all of us to communicate to folks and through letters to editor and so on and other things to get that message out.
Could I just see how many of you in this room knew that that was a law in California now? Yeah, two of us. The other thing I just want to mention is that this really is a good example of the thin edge of the wedge, in that some of the rationale for this bill is there was already permission in California to allow up to 12-year-olds, as young as 12-year-olds, to treat sexually transmitted diseases in these children without their parents' permission. So that bill got passed because people said, well, we don't want 13-year-olds with syphilis running around, and so it's really a good thing. She might not want to tell her parents. But then it was because that passed, the rationale for this bill was, well, if you're allowing 12-year-olds to get antibiotics without their parents' permission, this is preventive, so you might as well allow this too. And so now the next bill after that will rely on the passage of this bill, and there it goes. Pretty soon you'll have 12-year-olds who can, you know, God knows what they get driver's license or something. So anyway, I'll leave the floor, but it's really amazing that something nobody knows about this kind of bill, and there it goes.
Right.
Thank you, Tony.
No, thank you.
No, I was just going to say that I remember reading at the time that the governor was taking a big hit for signing that bill. That is
Not a big enough one.
yeah, it's got to be mentioned again.
Yeah, no, again, a lot of people have never heard that coming out, and we try to fight and send it out. I believe it was part of my wife's and my newsletter that went out. Incidentally, if you want to get our newsletter, let our staff know. But it's a bill that, again, we got voted. There's a lot of things up there where I feel other way, but again,
You're a firewall.
I try to do my best, what I think is right. Sir.
So it may be that what you just brought up could be an example, maybe not. I just don't know that much about this bill. The retention issue you mentioned. Is there a pattern? So I'm asking you because I don't have any real sense of how Sacramento works. Mm-hmm. Is there a pattern here where special interests have basically taken over California? So did you know, maybe whoever makes what is it, Gardasil, right, you know, buy themselves that bill?
Right. Obviously, there's always interests that come in, talk about different pieces of legislation, and they get active and involved on different bills.
But that's okay. I mean, that's right. Part of kind of the process.
Right.
Has it gotten to the point where the public's interests are no longer dominating? You know, what Sacramento?
What I can tell you on that avenue is things will get better starting this year, and the reason being is the last 10 years, at least I can speak from experience the last 10 years, I believe competition breeds success. And I also believe that over the last 10 years, we had district lines that were super safe on one side or the other side. And there's a lot of my colleagues, by the way, that don't do things like this. They don't come out in the community, they don't do community coffees, they're not out there. So when they go home, they go home. They don't go, and they represent a community, and a lot of them just stay up in Sacramento. Or that happens, by the way, in Washington, D.C. And then what happens is the only people come in talking to them are not their constituents, but they're you know, special interests. I think the way that happens is when you have super safe districts where there's no competition whatsoever, they can take the constituents for granted, and then all of a sudden they're not out in the community. And how can you represent a community when you're not in the community? Now we have more competitive districts across the state of California, one, and then two, I think that's going to make folks now realize either they lose their job or they start getting out in the community and interacting with the community. The reason why I do this, by the way, is because I think it does make me a better legislator. Now, there'll be some that will try to zing you at some of these things, and okay, that's part of your job, though. You have to represent everybody. When you get up to Sacramento, you have to represent everybody, and you have to be accessible to everybody. And so that's why I like to do these things, because I think legislators who are out in the community, who are interested in getting voices of everyday citizens who don't understand how Sacramento works, and you know, they're working, doing their job, taking care of their family, that's what representative democracy is about, and I think we're going to turn the corner when it comes to that. Oh, the last 10 years, it's been very bad. Sir, come back over.
My voice isn't very well, so I'll stand up. Hopefully you can hear me more. We in California have a very agricultural economy. We are the world's largest producer of 35 different crops that I know of. And Monsanto Chemical Corporation is pushing very hard to get GMO foods so that you'll never know that you have them. Is there anything that California is pushing to get this on the label so we will know whether we have natural foods or genetically modified foods, because in my opinion, from what I've read, genetically modified foods are only good for the profit margin. They're not necessarily good for your health.
Okay.
So is there anything about that going on?
I haven't heard much about it. I would love to, I'll follow up. I haven't heard anything being addressed in Sacramento regarding the issue, so I will take that issue and hopefully research it, and if you can write your name and phone number, we can get back to you on the issue to see if there's something we can do about it. Well, you made an interesting point on agriculture. Agriculture is one of the giant industries within California, and as I went up to the northern part of my district, up in Orcutt, Teixeira, Alan Teixeira, Teixeira Farms and Mark Teixeira, they're a large broccoli grower, and this is one of the frustrations that a lot of growers have. So as I walked through, we finished our tour. He said, "Senator, let me show you something." And he showed me one state agency with a letter saying he couldn't recycle any of his water. And then he showed a separate state, they're both separate state agency, said he had to recycle all of his water. So he said, "Senator, I'm happy to do what you want to do, but I can't recycle none of it and all of it at the same time." and one of the biggest frustrations with growers, as I talk to them, is the water issue, obviously, but also is the duplication of the regulations and state agencies that don't communicate with each other, that often give them conflicting things that they have to do. So there's no way for them to follow the rules, so to speak. And both of them had fines attached. That's why I'm carrying a bill right now that's gaining momentum, actually. It's called the Bureaucracy Realignment and Closure Commission. And this is modeled after the Base Realignment and Closure Commission. If you remember back when we won the Cold War, there was a goal from the Department of Defense to shut down some of the military bases. And every time it came up, the local congressman and senator would sit down. And so what they did is they took this nonpartisan commission, they went around the country and looked where there was duplication. And so when they saw duplication, they offered a streamlined plan, and they gave it to Congress for a simple offer that vote. That's how we were able to get that done on the federal side of the base realignment. So I want to do the same thing for these bureaucracies in California, because we have a lot of duplication in terms of bureaucracies that do the same thing, and they don't communicate with each other. I will give you an example. You have a Board of Equalization and a franchise tax board. There's no reason to have both. So now what we'll do, and a lot of times constituents call my office because they call one state agency, they get referred to another state agency, to another state agency, and they get referred back to the one they call my office. They're all angry, rightfully so, and then my staff has to go through that morass. That's why this would be, one, more efficient for the constituents, and also save a lot of money. Governor Brown said, "Hey, if you want bold ideas, save money to maximize those precious dollars to do get sent back to them." So I'm taking him up on his offer on some of these bold ideas, and I think it's gaining momentum. In fact, Bob Hertzberg, who's a Democrat former speaker, put in part of his plan on the California board, and I think we're gaining momentum when it comes to that. And by the way, you have to do things to get things accomplished on bipartisan level. I'm proud to say I do work well, for example, with Alex Padilla. I'll get into that bill later. But there's ways that you can come up with this, and this is an idea. The nonpartisan commission, the governor gets 4 appointments. Each of the party leaders get appointed, so you get 8 commissioners who come together and talk about streamlining bureaucracies, and that's a way to be effective, to be more efficient and effective and safe. Go ahead.
Yeah, you have on here excessive regulations. Seems like they're strangling our state.
They are.
So is there any way out of this?
Well, one is this bureaucracy thing. But yeah, no, as I go around and talk, as high as the tax structure is here in California, we have one of the highest tax, we're one of the highest tax states in the nation. But when I talk to small businesses and business owners, people who create jobs, the biggest complaint is not even the tax system, it's the regulation. It's, hey, people want to follow the rules, and they want to know what the rules are, but there's way too much in terms of regulation. I was in a business, by the way, that it was in renewable energy, harness the power of ocean waves. And the reason why we don't have that technology here is prevalent around the world is because there's too many state agencies that want to be part of it. I mean, there's a FERC, there's a PUC, there's the Energy Commission, Coastal Commission. All these commissions want to be, have to get approval, and so venture capital does not come through because they know the morass of the regulations. So I think we can unleash a lot of ingenuity here in the United States, as we are very entrepreneurial people here in the United States, but particularly here in California, if we lighten that load and let people be successful. You know, the best baseball analogy, in fact, I'm going to Simi Valley to throw out the first pitch in Little League today. The best baseball analogy is people want to know what's fair and foul, but too many times now government's telling you who the pitcher is, who the catcher is, the hit run, and so on and so forth. Hold on, I want to make sure, again, I want to, because you already got, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't know if you noticed, I was last week, or the week before last, on walls, on WALLST.com. They rated all the states in the United States. And we were, California had the pleasure of being rated out of 50 states, number 50. And the reason was because employment, per capita cost of taxes, our state rating has gone down. We're one of 3 states the state's rating has gone down. I know I was born in California. We used to get a Golden State. I know the price of gold's gone up since then, and I know the price of California cost of running government's gone up since gold. This is a left-handed curveball question to you, but in your opinion, what do you think we can achieve being number 49?
You have high hopes, don't you?
I don't know what it is.
That is a left field. When people start paying attention to what their elected officials do, and when people start seeing and getting angry and talk, you know, I think there'll be a big shift when people feel like their voice is not being heard. And however, I will say that there's a few folks that I'll give you an example. When we talk about the tax structure, we're one of only 3 states in the nation that charges sales tax on manufacturing equipment. So I happen to believe small business and manufacturing really help drive an economy. And so when we're only one of 3 states, and by the way, the only West manufacturing really help drive an economy. And so when we're only one of 3 states, and by the way, the only Western state that charges sales tax on manufacturing equipment, when people are looking at where they're going to move those manufacturing jobs, a lot of times they don't want to come to California, which is based on the cost. This is the bottom line issue. So I have a bill every year to eliminate that sales tax on manufacturing equipment, and it doesn't go through. But this is how you can be smart. Okay, you offer that bill and talk about why it's the right thing to do. But then, Alex Padilla, who's the state senator from Pacoima, didn't feel he could go that far. But we sat down, we talked, and he says, I think I can get a good block of my Democrats to go up for manufacturing for green technology. And so we sat down, and I said, okay, a lot of my Republican friends didn't want to do it for green technology, they want to do it for everything. And I said, well, let's show that it works on green technology, and I lost a lot of my Republican friends on that vote. But we had enough coalition in that kind of, I brought in some folks, Alex brought in some folks, and we got it passed. Well now, when you look, we're actually growing in manufacturing jobs on green technology because they don't have to pay that sales tax. And so we're showing that it works. Now Alex and I are going to do it for biotech. Now biotech is important to me because Amgen is one of the largest employers in my district. But I'm hopeful that we show that it works, and then we can finally get to that final point where we eliminate that sales tax, because I think we do need to grow manufacturing jobs here, and it does become, people change their behavior based on the tax structure. So those are little things that I'm trying to do to create jobs, and to get on, at least instead of going this way and keep digging a hole, start going back this way and try to get things moving in the right direction. And at the end of the day, when I look in the mirror, I want to say that I moved the ball in the right direction. I'm trying. And it's important to have relationships on the other side. And I've worked on many bills with Alex Padilla, where we figure, where we have that common ground. He says, I can't go here, I can't go here, but where can we agree to try to move things forward? And I think that's what's going to be important.
Just a comment that you understand about regulatory burden and how it destroys jobs, and we vote for you, but there's a whole bunch of other fellows there. How many other people that you work with understand that basic principle? Yeah, not many.
I would say in the state senate of 40, I would say about 13, 14, maybe up to 17, 16, 17.
Really understand it?
I understand, yeah, absolutely.
Or at least interested.
Interested, but understand it. But again, there's the push-pull of their constituencies within their community. Like everybody, when they come to you with a regulation, it sounds good. But one of the things I would encourage is that you limit the amount of time that we spend in Sacramento. Right now, we meet more in Sacramento than we do in Washington, D.C. And you know, I think too many legislators value their success on how many, in terms of the number of bills they pass. And there's a limit on each number that you can introduce. But all you do is a legislator will go to the Rules Committee and ask for an exemption, and they'll get it. Or they'll make it what they call a committee bill. So they carry a committee bill. There's way too many bills that are introduced in Sacramento. And I think a lot of what's being introduced are legislators who are trying to show their constituents, look at all the hard work I'm doing. Or they read something in the newspaper and they say, oh, there ought to be a law. And by doing that, by thousands of bills being introduced and signed every year, you're creating those regulations. And I think the best way to limit that is limit the amount of time that you go to Sacramento, that you get the job done, and then come back and live under the laws you created, and you're out in the community more often. And so I think that would be a good step in the right direction.
Tony, I know you touched on pension situations. In fact, people are retiring early, they've got a lifetime benefit, and that's draining the pension coffers. I'm not sure if people are aware that in Ventura County and LA County, a couple other counties here in Southern California, that aren't part of CalPERS. Like we have our Ventura County Chief Executive making $228,000 a year. With pensions spiking legal at this point, she's able to put in enough stuff to where she will have a $272,000 a year for life pension. The other top management people in Ventura and other counties that are making over $100,000 a year are retiring with higher income than when they were working.
Right.
But the lower management down, you know, that are not making that much, on the average, are after 30 years of service, are making $38,000 per year. Any idea? You know, this, I don't know. I mean, it's like when I'm in insurance, if you do a disability policy, you can't make more on disability than you do working.
Right. Right.
And otherwise, everybody want to be on disability.
Right.
That's just a law in the insurance industry. Got to be something in pension that's going to keep that. There's got to be a limit, something similar.
This is going to hurt a lot of local communities, and you're absolutely right. I mean, we have to deal with it from the state level when it's out of control of the state. But many of these counties and many of the communities have the same problem. Look, I mean, a lot of people know and they figure out how to game the system. So when they, you know, store up all their sick time,
vacation time.
They go overtime, and really their pension's based on the last year's salary. So what happens is they say to their spouse, "I'm not going to see you for this year, but we're gonna, you know, it'll pay off in the long run." So what they do is they cash in all their sick time, they do a lot of overtime, and they spike up that last year's salary, and then their pension's based on that last year's salary. One school district in Victorville, it was on the radio a few years ago. Superintendent, the day before he retired, got a huge pay increase from the school board. Someone says, "Well, why wouldn't you get a pay increase the day you're leaving out the door?" Well, because and not only did the superintendent leave, get that big pension based on that, then went back as a consultant, so got the pension and then worked as a consultant for that same school district. And so kind of double dipping. We have to address those issues. At a local level, when you're talking about who represents you in the county or the city, but also in the state, because we can't sustain that, and people are making more when they retire than before when they were working in that, and that doesn't happen, by the way, in the private sector. A lot of us, you know, we put money into our independent retirement, and it takes time to build that up. You know, in down economy, you're seeing you have to work a little bit more to retire. there's just no way we can have that kind of system and sustain it, and it's going to be a major problem to a lot of localities across the state. Mr. Goodwin.
Hi, Tony.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Those of you who don't know, this is the Ventura County assessor.
I work for all of you.
He does a fantastic job. He's always very responsive to constituents.
Property assessor?
Beg pardon?
The property assessor? Yes.
Yeah, okay, I can talk afterwards. But what I wonder, I was just thinking of the last thing you brought up. One idea I had, because, obviously you're Clintock used to always say, if you're not the party in power, of course, you can speak to the issues and have some contribution. Maybe, and because a lot of Democrats are a little bit resistant to, putting too much pressure on local government, which tends to be also, influenced a lot by their same party. One thought I had on this issue you just talked about, especially the ones where there's an extreme gifting towards the very end for a director of a small district or this or that, is if you could treat the gift of public funds part of the legislation. The law says it's illegal to give away public funds. There are certain actions that are defined as a gift of public funds. So maybe if the legislature would say that spiking a director, basically giving a director a going away gift because he treated all the directors so nice, giving that executive a gift in that last 6 months of his salary or something is a gift of public funds. So that there was some kind of test of consistency throughout the salaries. I don't want to say people can't have reasonable salaries or reasonable benefits, but to keep from this spiking occurring, a lot of it will occur in small districts that have much less view. The Taxpayers Association in Ventura County are doing a good job of kind of hunting down some of these retirement issues and putting them in the paper. But anyway, so my idea is think about the line of law where it's illegal to give away public funds, and getting maybe some of this defined in that as would be considered a gift of public funds. Now that'll stop them real fast.
Absolutely. So you're looking at it, and then part of the Brown pension reform is to talk. We are addressing the pension spike. So you do a rolling average of like the last 3 or 4 years. So there's ideas out there, but I will definitely take a look, because that's a major problem. But we're only addressing state issue. We need to figure out what we do at the local.
I think I'm not a lawyer, but I think this idea would, every county has a district attorney. The district attorney enforces the law. And there are issues about the gift of public funds. As an elected official working for you, my salary is a fixed number. So in other words, I don't have vacation time. I don't have spiking opportunities. And I came into this later than most. I was in the private sector before I became an assessor, so I don't have the years of service a lot of do. But so there's a little bit of range, but I'm still going to get a good retirement. The county retirement plan is based on years of service, whatever my salary is. For most county employees, it's the last 3 years already is the smoothing thing. But the issue of spiking, and where I see a lot still happening, is some of these small districts that are, a Recon Park district, a Harbor district, something it has very little visibility. Right. But they hire executive directors to be the manager who are paid more than I'm paid, or our county, a lot of county officials are paid. Right. And so. Anyway, that's just the idea.
No, absolutely. And when I mentioned the Victorville, it was a small school district that there's not a lot of oversight, and they feel like they can get away with it when no one's watching. And there are groups like the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, the Ventura County Taxpayers Association, that are out there to expose those abuses, so we can address those issues.
Tony, I can see a bonus, at the end of their time, whatever. Let's say it's $40,000, but for that to be now setting the standard for their retirement for the next 30 years, there's where the problem lies, because that multiplied by 30 years, plus times hundreds of people.
Plus when they retire, probably about 15, 20 years before anybody in the private sector, lifetime, and making more than they did when they were working, and then lifetime health benefits where the health costs are growing. People are living longer, thank God. But that's something that we have to sustain as a society, and we just can't do it. So we have to address those issues.
Coming back to the streamlining government, I mean, the proposal certainly sounds an outstanding one, but this has been something which has been out there as a problem for years. And I know there's been some commissions looking at wasteful spending and trying to put together things to do. Can you speak a little bit to what progress has been made over the past 4 or 6 years, whatever, in terms of streamlining things already, or do you think the fact that there's been a lot of talk and rhetoric and things that have gone into it, nothing's happened differently?
I don't think we've done a lot in terms of streamlining over the last 3, 4, 5 years. And actually, I mentioned we're getting momentum. This isn't the first year I did the bracket bill, but now I'm getting noticed by some, Bob Hertzberg, who's a former speaker on the Democratic side, who's now put a part of his reform package in California Forward, which they're talking about throwing out some initiatives. But also, when you have an initiative out there, it creates pressure for the legislature to act before they have to defend their vote, before the people. So what I'm saying is sometimes it takes a few years in doing things just like this and getting the momentum to talk about what I think is a no-brainer idea to get that momentum forward. You're never going to pass things the first time because people always will fight against the status quo. And I always mention this, Howard Jarvis and Paul Gann, when they did Prop 13, they failed the first couple times they tried. Everybody remembers 1978 when Prop 13 passed, but they failed a few times before they actually got it done. They tried. Everybody remembers 1978 when Prop 13 passed, but they failed a few times before they actually got it done. And why did it happen? Because seniors on fixed incomes were being taxed out of their homes. And it got to be such a problem that almost every elected official in Sacramento, by the way, was against Prop 13, including Governor Jerry Brown, who was governor back then. And then when it passed, Jerry Brown said it was the greatest idea ever and went the other way, because he saw how overwhelming that problem was and the people voted. And so it took Howard Jarvis and Paul Gann some years to build up momentum to get that done. I always use that as an example because it does take time to get your reform agenda out there because people will always fight against the status quo.
On another note, can you speak to some of your thoughts on the on redevelopment funds disappearing and how you see this may impact various communities in your district?
It's gonna impact the local communities dramatically. I always used, when I was up in Sacramento, I always used, for example, Thousand Oaks. I mean, that whole set of Garden Plaza, that whole boulevard was created by redevelopment funds. Were there abuses among redevelopment agencies? Absolutely. There was a lot of abuses, but we had a reform agenda out there that was authored by Bob Huff. He's a state senator from the Diamond Bar area. But for Governor Brown and them just to come and pretty much what I would say is raid the local funds to fix our budget problems was not right. And then we tried to kind of address some of the concerns because there's bond funds out there and there's real problems that come from taking that money. When we started addressing it in the bill, Jerry Brown says dead on arrival. And so until the governor is open to trying to fix where we are moving forward, we're kind of in a paralysis. And I think that's going to be a big detriment to local city councils, local communities, because redevelopment funds were out there to be able to, kind of revitalize the economy in your local, and they help create jobs. Now, were there abuses? Absolutely, and we need to address those. But we, the legislature, with the leadership, I would say most of the legislature was against it, and Jerry Brown really twisted arms to get that done. We have to address it moving forward because I think we're going to have a huge economic impact to the negative because of this. Sir?
I wanted to go back to jobs for a second.
Sure.
I wanted to ask your opinion on what I see is a lot of the restrictions we have are from radical environmental groups that stop projects because some trouble used to live there 1,000 years ago. And it affects all the different jobs that get involved in California because they're so powerful. And my question is there anything that can be done to get the environmental groups back on the pendulum swung way too far? Is there any way for the government to rein that in and not let the environmental groups, or the radical environment, we're all environmentalists, but the radical ones, to not run this state for us?
I have something I'm very proud of, and one of the, I think is something that one of my top, say, 5 or 6 things that I did in Sacramento happened on that very issue. I don't know if you've heard about Farmers Field. It's the, people talking about it being the new LA football stadium, but it's not just for football. Let me walk you through this. AEG, which is Ansu's Entertainment Group, they're the ones that revitalized downtown Los Angeles and the LA Live. They wanted to build a new stadium at the location of the LA Convention Center. Well, when you look at the LA Convention Center, I don't know, how many people have been there? Pretty bad place to go, right? When you get to the LA Convention Center, you say, this is an old, archaic convention, and we can't compete for these big conventions in Los Angeles or in Southern California with Vegas, Chicago, New York, and some of the other areas. And so, Mr. Anschutz and Tim Lewicki came to me and Alex Padilla. Again, I work well with Alex, and so we came together. Here's a gentleman that wanted to put $1.2 billion, private money, his money, and inject it into the California economy, create 23,000 jobs the minute we passed the bill. 23,000 jobs. And that's just out of the gate on the building and construction. Part of that is not just the new stadium that will be also a convention center, but it's also 3 brand new hotels in downtown Los Angeles. And that will enable them to compete around the country with anybody in terms of creating those convention centers and what kind of economic impact it brings. Again, 22,000 jobs. The only thing he asked us to do is expedite the CEQA process. Meaning, if there's any environmental concerns, you can't do what we call document dump at the very end, just to delay a project, to delay a project, to delay a project. It says if there's any concerns, they address those concerns and go right to, they bypass the lower court, go right to the high court, get the decision done, fix whatever environmental concern there might be, and move the project forward. And that's what all he asked the legislature to do. And so, actually, this bill was probably dead 6, 7, 8 different times, and we had resolve to say, no, we're moving this forward. And I will tell you, the very first time we put up for a vote within our caucus, I was the only Republican up on it. Only one. And I said, what gives? This is pro-business. They said, what? Forget LA. They're not doing it for us. Forget that. Why am I helping LA? It's a democratic city, so on and so forth. I said, because it creates jobs in Southern California, and those jobs will help us fix our problem. And then, as we move forward, we created the same concept that we did for Farmers Field for the rest of the state, for big projects, to say, look, this is what we do to expedite the system. Again, this is where most investors are taking money out of California. Here's someone that says, I'm here and I want to put, again, private funds. When you look at some of these stadiums that are built, they always ask the taxpayers to pay for it. I think this is a model for the rest of the country. This gentleman said no public money whatsoever, and what they did is they used bonds from parking for Nokia Theater and for Staples Center to pay back some of the bonds. But it's all exposure just from AEG. So it's $1.2 billion. We finally got it done, and by the time I was out convincing my colleagues, I had 14 of the 15 Republicans up on it, and Alex got enough of the Democrats. So that bill was going to get killed so many different times. We passed it. They're now working forward, going forward on moving forward in construction that will create 23,000 new jobs out of the gate, not to mention the jobs it will create in terms of bringing people from all over the world, doing conventions. And we met with the NFL, and they said once this is constructed and built, they'll do 4 of the next 8 Super Bowls at this location. Think about what that will do for our local economy. That would be remarkable. But that's something where we'd say, okay, it was the extreme environmental community that was absolutely opposed to this because they like the document dumping and they like delay. That's how they end up killing projects. And it really brought angry. I was right across from this gentleman who works with the building trades, and he was talking a heart-wrenching story about how he has to go back to his family. He had tears in his eyes and he can't find a job. And we pass this bill, we can get jobs here. And I think that's important. You always have to, when you talk about jobs, you always talk about the economic impact that it has on that individual and their family. Look, my dad like most, we had struggling times growing up as kids. I know what it's like. My dad came home one day, and no fault of his own, he lost his job. And my brother was an all-state soccer player, had a scholarship to go play soccer at university. He gave it up to work full-time to help the family, and went to CSUN, and took him 7 years to graduate because he was working full-time helping our family. That's happened across the state, and you can't just say this is a job. You have to know what that means for a family. So,
how are you going to ensure illegals don't get some of those jobs?
You know, look, I don't know how we ensure that, but the bottom line is there's going to be a lot of people that will create jobs and they'll have the economic impact there. And when that's built, a lot of the hotels, a lot of the businesses, a lot of the convention centers, the restaurants, they're going to make money. That's a whole separate issue. I don't know how you do that, but those jobs are not going to be all. Those jobs are not going to be all done, you know, by illegals. And by the way, when you create those jobs, they will spend money in that local economy, and there'll be an economic impact.
Okay, the gentleman over there had his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hey, I apologize.
I was just curious. I've heard you speak about on Obamacare and how it's being implemented at the state level, and the most recent hot button issue has been the controversy with Rush Limbaugh, in which Democrats are now asking Republicans to denounce what he said about the young woman who testified before Congress.
Which one, young woman? Fluke.
Yeah, that's, and I'm curious, yeah, he called her some words that I won't repeat here, I'm sure you've seen on the news. I was wondering what your thoughts are about that. Is that something that you plan to do along with other Republicans? You think that's good for?
One, I haven't heard the Rush Limbaugh quote, so I can't address that part, but you know, if we want to talk about the overriding Obamacare issue, we can talk about Obamacare. I think when you
specifically contraception, how that's being implemented. Do you think
what I
it's
find,
right?
You know what I find interesting when they bring up this contraception issue? It's like I liked what Mitt Romney talked about in the debate. He says, "Really, this is the question." He asked the question: should the states have a right to contraception, so on and so forth? Look, no state's asking for it, and those are kind of like gotcha questions to get people off of the real issues of what's on the mind. I have not done one of, by the way, I've not done one of these community coffees where people really, their burning desire is, where's your stance on contraception? They want to know what you're going to do to create jobs in the economy. So I'm not going to be focused in on the contraception issue. I don't think it's an issue that's on the burning desire of everybody right now, and I didn't hear the rest of the Limbaugh quotes. But when we talk about the Obamacare, you know, I'm very fearful of what we're doing here in the state of California. No matter if you're for it or against it, in California we have precious resources. We're speeding up the implementation of Obamacare, money that we don't have. And regardless where you stand on the issue, it's in question whether it's going to be federal law. It's going to the Supreme Court, and most experts think it's going to be failed based on the mandate in terms of the Supreme Court. So you have the court, but also you have an election, and every one of the candidates running against Obama says they're going to repeal it. So whether it's the court or the president, it's still in question whether it's going to be implemented in federal law. But here in California, we're speeding up this system through and starting to spend a lot of money we don't have. So if it comes out, we're going to be spending money and wasting some of those dollars. Now, when we talk about California in terms of health care, there is a bill by Mark Leno that's even worse. It's kind of Obamacare on steroids. It says you cannot own private health care insurance, and you have to go to the government side. And so this bill has been going through, and actually, when Schwarzenegger was governor, it got to his desk a couple different times. It stalled this time in the health, actually on the floor by only a couple votes in the Senate floor. But I always put it this way, and this is something that everybody can understand in terms of kind of the government-run healthcare. If you want the compassion of the IRS and the efficiency of the DMV running your healthcare decisions, this bill's for you. Because I think what we need to do is we need to make sure that we have access to care for everybody. But we also have to talk about the quality of care. And if you ever go up to Seattle, I encourage you to go up to Seattle or Washington or any one of the Canadian border states. Hip replacements in Canada take 1.5 to 2 years. And a lot of folks, as they get older, they say, well, you know, this is going to be an expensive procedure. You had a good life, you know.
That's exactly right.
You know, because of the cost. And I am very fearful of us getting into a system like that, where you have to wait that long for care, that everybody, of us getting into a system like that, where you have to wait that long for care, that everybody, and we take it for granted, the kind of quality care and immediate care that we get. I mean, we will lose our way if we go down this path, and that's my opinion. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Senator.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I
really appreciate it.
I just have, how can the state make it illegal to buy a legal product? This bill, how can they just make, it's illegal to buy Hondas, it's illegal to buy cigarettes, it's illegal to buy sugar, how can this bill even be constitutional or?
Which bill are you talking about?
The bill where it makes it illegal to buy private health insurance.
Oh yeah, well,
how
we're
can that be?
We're state lawmakers. We can change that law. That's how. If the state says, the state lawmakers say, okay, we're going to do this healthcare and this government-run healthcare in California, they can do it, and that's what they're doing. And again, it's not like I'm talking about something that gets killed in the first committee. This bill actually got to the governor's desk a few different times, and we organized because we were fearful about what Jared Brown would do. Yeah. And so we worked overtime to try, and we barely stopped it out of the state senate this time. But we have an election coming up, by the way. Anybody who's running for the state senate or the state assembly, I'd ask them where they stand on this issue, particularly this issue.
I mean, irrespective of what happens in that election that we're not going to talk about, you're turned out, so you're not going to be our state senator anymore.
No, I agree. Yeah. So, no, and it's an important question to ask people because this is out there, and it's and you're only a couple votes away from this getting to the governor's desk. And by the way, the cost. I talked about the quality and how outrageous it is, but the cost. But this is nonpartisan legislative analysts, what we call the LAO. The nonpartisan LAO say first year of implementation, the cost is more expensive than our entire general fund. And again, this bill is moving. It's not like it's being
What's
held
its number?
I have to get you the number.
Is it called Leno bill?
It's Leno's single payer bill.
Okay,
Look, if you Google Mark Leno single payer healthcare, the bill will come up, and if you need the bill number, we'll send it to you. Write it on your card, and I'll send you the bill number. But it's something that absolutely frightens me as a Californian, and especially I have two children, 6-year-old and 4-year-old. You know, private health care insurance, you're going to get rid of that, and you're going to have government run. I do not want a Canadian type health care system. Mayor, did you have a question?
I think she put her hand up and.
All right. Anybody that doesn't know, this is Mayor Janice Parton. She does an incredible job here in the city.
Earlier, I would have been here.
I'm throwing out the first pitch at Simi Valley Little League. So, hey, do you want to give an update? We're almost out of time. Do you want to give an update on what's going on in the city?
I'm going to be doing my State of the City this month. So I love to have all of you come and see that. It's also kind of a fundraiser for our Chamber of Commerce that really could use the help. But I did want to mention something to you that's very frustrating with regard to redevelopment. And about a year and a half ago, the city purchased a piece of land from the state of California over here on LA Avenue. And we bought it at what they considered fair market price, so we paid it, knowing that the state was in dire need of funds. I didn't feel that guilty about it, you know, with taxpayers' money, because we needed that site. But what happened was when redevelopment went away, when the governor took it away from us, that property will now go up for bid. With that specific group of individuals, the 7 of them. But what bothers me the most is that we bought it from the state and then the state took it away. And somehow it just seems like a catch-22 of complete unfairness, knowing that they had to have known, some of them, or at least the governor at that time, that was down the road and that was going to happen. And to me, that's theft.
Well, the governor...
I'm just sharing that with you.
No, the governor always knew he was pushing this. He did not have the votes early on in the process. But the governor made it one of his top priorities and really pushed hard. A lot of folks, a lot of my colleagues gave in on that effort.
Well, I'm
So-
not over that. I'm not over it yet. I'm
No.
still very angry about it.
Yeah.
And not only that, you know, how some cities, sure, there was some abuse, but I think the way they sold it to the legislators is there was a lot of abuse. And that's why when you go town to town and look at all the wonderful things that happened through redevelopment, I just think it was portrayed in a very evil, terrible way, unfair, and I'm still not over it.
And
So.
there, when people talk about the abuses, there was a bill out there to address the abuse.
There was.
And it was by Bob Hoff, a state senator from Diamond Bar.
Yeah.
We had a reform plan. We had a reform plan.
Yeah.
They didn't.
But, you know, I know that the state, you know, has to fund schools, and that's very important to all of us already, we know that. But because they couldn't make their number, they come and steal, you know, what we're doing in a positive direction. I feel like the High Street, you know, was a real big high priority for Moorpark. Could have brought in revenue, building, you know, little coffee shops and all kinds of things that would draw people to our community. And that was a long-term plan that we had planned for many years. And to me, it's gone.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm not a big fan of our governor right now.
Hey, join the club.
I think that's all I have to say until my State of the City, but I hope everyone can attend.
I hope that you. Where is the State of the City for everybody?
It's at Cafe Forenza, March 21st.
Perfect. Thanks, Mayor, for coming. Last question, because it's about time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Proposition 8 for gay marriages, I believe, if I'm correct, back in history, marriage was instituted by the church, so therefore marriage is a religious term, not a state term. I think the states and countries got into marriage many centuries after that. Now, I have no objection to civil unions having the full legal effect of a marriage. It's just the term that I object to, because that, to me, is a religious term. And so I think there's religious terms and civil terms should be separate. Do you have any questions?
I support Prop 8. I think marriage should be between a man and a woman. So. With that, let me just conclude. Again, I promised everybody I would get it out on time. I want to thank all of you for taking time in your busy Sunday, your busy weekend, or Saturday, days run together. your busy weekend and your Saturday morning. I really appreciate the time and opportunity. For those of you that might have wanted to ask a question, didn't want to ask in front of the group, please fill out the forms. Please hand it to my staff, Matt Guthrie's right here. And we'll try to address those concerns. Dan, thanks for attending. Mayor, thanks for attending. Really appreciate it. I think it's important that our constituents know that we work well together on important issues, and you both do a remarkable job for our community, and I'm proud to say I'm a big fan and supporter of both of you. Thanks for coming out, and really appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and thanks again for having me here on this short time, and I'll see you at the next community coffee. Thank you.